everybody. So this is the video that goes along with the 6-1 lesson in our math book, and that starts on page 315. Before we jump into the page though, because this is a new unit, this unit is about geometry, which is the study of shapes. And we use shapes in art and we use shapes in math, but the way that we talk about them in art and math, it's a little bit different. So I wanted to just clarify a few things before we start with the actual math. So in art, you can have lines that are like woo-loo-loo-loo, like that, right? And they can be all sorts of crazy shapes. In math, a line means something specific. A line means a series of points that are connected that go on forever in both directions. So that's a line, that's a line, this is a line. It's straight, it's unbroken, and it continues forever, and that's indicated by these arrows on the end. There's also something called a line segment, which is just a piece of a line. So if you were to take this chunk of this line, right, that would be a line segment. But then instead of having arrows, it would have dots or little dashes on the end to signify that it is not a continuing thing. It's a chunk, a segment. And then there's one more thing that's a little bit of both, and that's called a ray. And that's excuse me, a line segment that has a point on one end, but then continues forever on the other side. So a ray could look like that, like that, like that. And I like to think about it as like a sun ray, right? Like the rays from the sun. They start from the sun and then they continue out, right? So those are all rays coming off of the sun. They all continue, or they start at one point, the sun, and then they continue out forever. Let me switch the end of the stylus. Hopefully it's a little bit neater on this one. And then in addition to that, if you have two rays that join at one point, or if you have two line segments that join at one point, whether it's open, big, or closed, small, this is called an angle. This opening here, that part. This is the angle. And then shapes in math are called polygons, and they might have angles on the inside of the shape, like that. Okay, so that's a little brief introduction. Now we're going to jump into the page, and I hopefully that will clarify the difference between art lines and math lines. So let's go ahead, and we're going to start. This is the little parent letter. It says you're going to be learning about geometry and measurement. Excuse me, sorry. In the first part, we're learning about quadrilaterals, and quad, just like in quarter, means four, and lateral means side. So quadrilateral means four-sided shapes. Specifically, we're going to focus on parallelograms, which means the opposite sides are parallel, and we'll get into that in a little bit. Parallel means they would continue forever and never touch each other. A rectangle is also a parallelogram. It has the opposite sides parallel. But in addition, it also has right angles, and we'll talk about those angles too. It's a specific type of angle. A square is a very special kind of rectangle. It has it's a parallelogram as well. The sides would never touch if they continued. It also has right angles. and all the sides are exactly the same length as each other. And that's what makes it a square. And then there's a rhombus, which is a little bit different. It is still a parallelogram, which means those two sides would continue and they wouldn't touch. These two sides could continue and they wouldn't touch. It does not have to have right angles, but it does need to have all the sides equal in length to each other, like a square. So you can kind of imagine if someone took their finger and put it on top of a square and pushed it a little bit, it could look kind of like a rhombus. And so a square is a square, it's a parallelogram, it's a rectangle, and a rhombus. Kind of like how, you know, you could say an apple is an apple, but it's also a fruit, which is also a plant, you know, like there's different ways to categorize things. All right, so you'll be looking at this, and if you have questions, you know, hopefully they'll become clear throughout the video. But I also recommend that you find a friend to do your math with. We have, I'll make something in Flipgrid where you can search for a math partner, but or you could just call up a friend, start the video together, and then, you know, when you decide you get what to do, you can go ahead and help each other throughout the video, just like we do in class. I think math is a lot more fun with a partner. So, like we talked about a minute ago, a ray is a part of a line that has one end point, right there, and continues forever in one direction. The arrow on the end shows that it's continuing in that direction, and the point shows that it is stopping there. So those are all rays. And then we talked about two line segments, or two rays, that meet at an endpoint form an angle. So because these have dots, these are segments. They don't continue, but they join right here, and there's a little angle. This angle, it says right here, if it has a little square corner, like you could take a square or a piece of paper and like line it up in the edge of that corner, it makes a right angle right there, which is 90 degrees. And we'll get into that later if you're like, what do you mean degrees? Don't worry. It's not temperature degrees. It's something else. But it's a 90-degree angle, or a right angle. And what's pretty cool is if you have two lines that are perpendicular to each other, all of these angles are right? And they add up to 90, 90, 90, 90. 4 times 90 is 360. And if you know anything about like skateboarding tricks, a 360 is turning all the way around. So that's one fun way to remember it. Here's another angle between these two line segments. Here's an angle between these two rays. Some angles are smaller, and this is talking about the amount that it is open, not like the length of the lines, because you can have this is a bigger angle than 90 degrees, but even if the lines were only like that long, it would still be a bigger angle than 90 degrees. It doesn't matter what the length of the lines, because we know these are going to continue forever, right? So they could go like forever. And these lines go forever that way. So we're talking about how big it opens. Okay. Now, so when we talk about the angles in math, we like to give them a name so that you and I know which angle we're talking about. Because in a lot of shapes there are, let's see, there could be a bunch of angles. So if I wanted to talk about this one, I would have to give it a name, right? So we give them letters. This one is called angle V. We can call that one W, X, Y, Z. You can use any letter. And it's just so we know which one you're talking about. And then as you go from one page to the next, it's not like this will always be V. You don't need to remember that shape or anything. That's just a way to label it So don't stress about that. So this first question is, which of the angles are right angles? Give you a second to think about it. Yeah, if you remember what we talked about, if you could line up a corner of a page and stick it in there perfectly and nothing would hang over, then that's a right angle right there. So that would be W. Its name is angle W. Angle W. Which of the angles are smaller than a right angle? So remember, we're not talking about the length of the lines, we're talking about how big it opens. So this one, I can imagine a right angle would come to about there, but it's bigger than that, so not that one. This one is a right angle. This one, if I had that there, that would be about a right angle. So this is smaller, so this is angle X. Angle Y. And not angle Z. Angle Z looks a little bit bigger. So does V and... Yeah, so, okay, so number 3, which of the angles is larger than a right angle? That would be angle V. Angle Z. Great. All right, now on this page we're talking about triangles. And think about it. If you've ever ridden a tricycle, tri means 3 and an angle, right? So 3 angles in a triangle. And with geometry, the way you're going to identify all of your shapes, sorry, that's so messy, is by counting the sides and counting the angles. That's the way you identify a lot of different shapes in geometry. So get used to counting. So all of these have 1, 2, 3 angles, 1, 2, 3 sides. They are all triangles. So these triangles all have one right angle, and so we call them right triangles. It's impossible for a triangle to have more than one right angle, because if you think about it, okay, there's one right angle, and if you go off this side and make another right angle, it won't connect, right? Right here. You just have an open situation, and that is not a triangle, that is just like an open box situation. Excuse me. Okay, so in these triangles right here, all 3 angles are smaller than a right angle. None of them are right angles. You can look at each of them. And then in these triangles, one angle is larger. So this one is the larger one. That one's the larger one. This one's the larger one. That one's the larger one. And the angles that are smaller than 90 are called acute. And you can think of it as like, oh, the cute little angle. So cute. So little. And then the ones that are bigger than 90 are called obtuse. And that just sounds like a big word to me, obtuse, so big angle. All right, let's move on to the next one. Okay, so in looking at these triangles, and we've named them K, L, and M. I'm so sorry. You don't need to remember the names of these triangles. We're just naming them for this exercise, but that's how you name a triangle. Which one has a right angle? If you look, it's M, right? That's right there. Which triangle has all 3 angles smaller than a right angle? Well, I'm looking at this one. None of these are 90. If I look over here, this one is bigger than 90. This one's bigger than a right angle. So that's going to be K. And then which triangle has one angle larger than a right angle? Well, we talked about that already. It is L. All right. and that's where we're gonna pause. I'll make a second video for the rest of the pages. If you want to take a break right here, right now, that's fine with me. It's a lot of information. Maybe get up and dance a little bit, and I'll see you in the next video.